Our first speaker is no stranger to law enforcement in Suffolk County. After a 22-year career with the FBI, where she served as the senior supervisory resident agent overseeing the FBI's Long Island office, Geraldine Hart became the first woman to lead Suffolk County's 2,400-member police department. Following the civil unrest in our country during the summer of 2020, she led the Suffolk County Police Department through an 8-month-long state-mandated reform and reinvention process. She oversaw operations to decimate MS-13 and led efforts to end Suffolk County's record-setting opioid crisis. Former Commissioner Hart is now the Director of Public Safety at Hofstra University. Please join me as we welcome Geraldine Hart.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you. It's great to be with you here today. Let me begin by thanking Sheriff Errol Toulon for hosting this really critical event. I have enjoyed both a strong partnership and friendship with Sheriff Toulon, and together, I believe that we have made Suffolk County safer. I am delighted to be here and kick off what promises to be an excellent conference with engaging voices in law enforcement, government, and higher education. Over the years, I have had the privilege of working closely with many of the leaders that you'll be hearing from in the next 2 days. All have led through change, and all, I am certain, will have important insight into this critical topic. What you will also hear are the unique characteristics that each of us bring to the challenges that our organizations have faced, and how we all benefit from those distinct ways in which people lead. Each of us brings a leadership style and skills that are developed from our experience, who we are, and what we stand for. Our experiences, I would suggest, are uniquely different. History, as we know, will reflect that we are living in a time of great transformation. Today, I'd like to talk about the challenge of leading through times of change, to lend my voice and experience throughout my career, and especially to the challenges that we are all facing today in law enforcement. But my story is one that would not have included leadership had it not been for the people in my life who saw something in me, pushed me outside of my comfort zone, voices who led me here today, and my realization and acceptance that they were right. Some of you here are here for the same reason. There's perhaps someone in your life who identified something in you, qualities and character that make you stand out. For those leaders among us this morning, it is now our turn, our obligation to not only reach down to look, to identify and empower those who are well-suited in talent and temperament to lead our organizations into the future, but also to reach across to our colleagues and partners to offer support and guidance. So as a leader, I'll make my first executive decision of the day, and instead of speaking for the allotted 50 minutes, I'm going to give remarks in the area of 20 minutes and leave more time for your questions. Author Rudyard Kipling once said, "If history were taught in the form of stories, it would never be forgotten." So this is my story of a woman in law enforcement, first as an FBI agent and leader, and then as the commissioner of the 11th largest police department in the country. At the age of 29, I had my career plan set. I had completed my background investigation with the FBI, the final step in making my childhood dream of becoming an agent a reality. But then came a letter from the FBI withdrawing my offer of employment based on something that had come up in my background. I was devastated, but I refused to believe that there was an issue in my background. I had wanted to be an agent since a 5th grade field trip to Washington, D.C., and I could not imagine what they had found. So after weeks of endless calls attempting to contact a live person in D.C. to understand the decision, I was told that there was a student loan that had not been repaid. Again, not possible. I tracked down the loan, and in fact, it was a scholarship that required no payback. The error was corrected, and I was reinstated. But my message is never give up. During my first 15 years as a special agent, I worked in the criminal division on white-collar and Italian organized crime cases. I worked high-profile homicide cases like the Mafia Cops investigation, where 2 NYPD detectives were working for the Lucchese crime family and providing information that led to the execution of 8 individuals thought to be cooperating with law enforcement. I worked a number of cold case homicides, like the apprehension of Frankie Federico, a fugitive for more than 10 years, on the run after killing 2 people in East Northport, also thought to be cooperating with law enforcement. And I worked large-scale RICO organized crime cases. I can tell you that I never did it alone. I always worked in collaboration, bringing agents and detectives aboard who each brought unique contributions to the table. And during my time on the organized crime squad in Queens, I was the picture of contentment. I was living my dream as an FBI agent and raising my 2 children. But that changed in 2012 when I was summoned into my supervisor's office, who told me to close the door and sit down. I think all of us in this room know that feeling, and often it doesn't have a happy ending. But my boss, Lou, told me that the supervisor of the Genovese organized crime squad in the city was being promoted, and I was being considered to take his place. So without hesitation, I told my boss 2 things. First, I was not interested in leaving my current position, and I had no interest in management. And second, even if I did, there was no way I was ready. But time passed, and Lou continued to encourage me to reconsider. He conveyed to me why it was important to step up and leave my comfort zone to offer skills that I had to lead the FBI into the future. He said that I could be put in as an acting. I could try it for 6 months, and then when they posted the position, I could put in for it permanently. It was apparent after our talk that though he allowed me time to think about it, the die was cast. It is not easy to leave what you know and love and try something completely different. Many of us, and I'm talking to the women here with us this morning, think that unless we meet 100% of the job qualifications, we are not able to do the job. Indeed, research shows that women will not put in for a position unless they feel they meet 90% or more of the qualifications. Men will put in for a position if they feel they meet only 50% of the qualifications. We call it the fake it till you make it principle. I saw this on display outside the workplace when I would visit my daughter's elementary school, and the teacher would ask a question, and the boys' hands would shoot up. No girls. When called upon, the boy would simply shrug and say, I don't know. I was guilty of it myself. I ultimately decided to formally apply for the supervisor's job that Lou spoke to me about and was selected to fill the position. I was the only female in the organized crime division and only the second in the criminal division. Much to my surprise, I loved the job. The commute from Long Island to Lower Manhattan was not ideal, but with the bad comes the good. And there was a lot of good. I learned a ton from some very senior supervisors who were terrific mentors, and I partnered with the NYPD and made some impactful cases that included the arrest of the Asaros for their role in Lufthansa. During that period and beyond, I would try to identify those who had the characteristics to be a good leader. I would approach them with a promotion opportunity I felt that they should put in for, and the vast majority said they felt they weren't ready. Later, I advocated for and developed a mentorship program that the FBI New York office is using today to identify and mentor potential leaders. Much of the program is geared to understanding the positions and understanding the support that is available. So what if you're not fortunate enough to have a Lou pulling for you, or there's not a mentorship program available? Most importantly, develop a solid reputation. Take advantage of informal opportunities to lead. Think about yourself. I am sure there have been opportunities when you were the person on the scene that everyone was looking to. Maybe it started as one person asking your opinion, or 2, then 3. Then before you knew it, you're the one that they are waiting for before they make decisions. You're the one that's being summoned to the scene. Whether you realized it or not, you were beginning to look like a leader. I was fortunate. The FBI affords great autonomy to agents and therefore great opportunities to lead. As a case agent, I would naturally gravitate towards collaboration. Therefore, I was meeting with outside agencies, developing relationships, and including those individuals in my investigations. Not only did these relationships strengthen the investigations, but also allowed me the opportunity to lead. However, as a leader, it is important, as important as it is to lead, it is as important to collaborate and show your ability to get along with other people. While this may sound simple, in the area of law enforcement, there are, and this might come as a shock, tremendous egos. If you can navigate your way to build cohesive teams with successful outcomes, it goes a long way. When you're ready to step into formal leadership roles, make sure you let people know. Find people you trust and whose opinion you value. Ask their input and their advice. These people will help you get to where you need to be. These are the people that will speak to how qualified you are. This is especially important if you're not comfortable doing this yourself. Leave your comfort zone and be flexible, and if a spot becomes available and it's not exactly what you want, go for it and prove yourself. And be prepared, because when you're selected for a leadership position, do not do it alone. Find those that you work with, that you respect, and pick their brains. And when you find yourself in a leadership role, identify and advocate for those that you think would make good leaders. In 2014, I was selected to lead the FBI's Long Island office, and I had to follow my own advice and leave my comfort zone once again. Running the Long Island office was a test like no other. Working together with all of our partners and navigating a complex political field, which included high-level public officials under investigation, as well as the fight against the unprecedented MS-13 violence, presented daily challenges. When I arrived, the FBI's Public Corruption Squad in the city had just completed and closed an investigation into then-Chief James Burke. There was essentially no official relationship between the Suffolk County Police Department and the FBI, but there were good people in the Suffolk County Police Department who understood the value of partnering with the FBI and took a significant professional risk by working crucial cases together with the Bureau. Soon after I arrived, the Burke investigation was reopened and reassigned to the Long Island office. And after the arrest of Burke in December of 15, Tim Stony, who you will be hearing from tomorrow, took over and was named commissioner. Most of the individuals that I mentioned who had risked their careers to work with the Bureau were promoted to leadership roles and positions under the new commissioner. The importance of this new, open, and collaborative partnership cannot be overstated. It was soon afterwards that MS-13 homicides spiked in Suffolk County, with 17 brutal murders in just 18 months, including the quadruple homicide of 4 young men in Central Islip. Working together with our partners in Suffolk, Eastern District, and the FBI Task Force, MS-13 has been decimated. In addition, the FBI was invited back into the Gilgo Beach investigation, with significant resources allocated from the Bureau and a renewed partnership to reignite the investigation. All of this reinforced my practice of collaboration and taught me the value of steady leadership. I found a style which was passed along from the former director, which worked for me. You can be kind and tough, humble and confident. Once again, things were going well, so, as you know it, it was time for a change. This time, it was leaving the FBI after 21 years to take over as the 14th police commissioner of the Suffolk County Police Department. I often joke that after 21 years in the male-dominated FBI culture, working Italian organized crime, gang cases, and homicides, it was time for a little less testosterone. So the Suffolk County PD? Oftentimes, in my new position, people ask me about the differences between working in the FBI as opposed to the police department. And there are many differences. The biggest is that the police department offers us the opportunity to collaborate with our community partners. Of course, the final arbiter on this matter was my dad, a retired NYPD sergeant. And although he never said it, I always got the feeling that he didn't think the FBI was quite real law enforcement. So after receiving the offer to become commissioner, my first stop was at my parents' house. It was early morning, and my dad came to the door, and I shared the news. Dad, I'm going to be commissioner of the police department. And following a long pause to allow the news to sink in, he said, the police department. Well, finally, real law enforcement. So although there are differences between all of our organizations, the similarities are what makes us part of one proud family. So what was it like to be the first female commissioner of the 11th largest department in the country? Great, but not always easy. I recall moving in day when I walked past the row of portraits of the 13 male commissioners who had preceded me and remember thinking of Yogi Berra's quote, "The future ain't what it used to be." For me, there was no greater responsibility than the safety of the men and women of the Suffolk County Police Department and the residents that we served. I have no doubt that some may have felt uneasy about the task being handled by a woman. But I have found the best way to quiet your skeptics is to do your job and to do it well. I was resistant to the focus of being the first female commissioner, but I learned to appreciate the historic nature of the position. I saw it through my teenage daughter's eyes, and I saw it in the face of a female officer walking across the stage to receive her promotion while her daughter looked on. I don't think it's hyperbole to say that 2020 was the most challenging year in recent history of law enforcement. We can all tick off the list: civil unrest and police reform, New York State criminal justice reform, specifically bail and discovery reform, and a global pandemic. Fortunately for me, I had in place what I and many considered to be the best and most talented and cohesive groups of a command staff working together as a team, and we faced down challenge after challenge. Despite a 28% drop in crime from 2015 to 2019 and a 60% drop in the incarceration rate in Suffolk County, without input from law enforcement or public debate, the New York State Legislature passed sweeping bail and discovery reform effective in January of 2020. And we worked tirelessly together with our DA's office to develop a 24/7 case review bureau to meet the stringent requirements of discovery. Soon, a global pandemic touched down, shutting down New York and presenting unimaginable challenges, from maintaining a healthy workforce to effectively policing in an entirely different arena. Preparations began immediately, obtaining and distributing PPE and developing policies and procedures to keep our members and their families safe. I remember one late night, huddled with our chiefs, trying to draw up procedures for quarantine, what was close contact, who would be required to be out and for how long. I called on existing community partners to see how we could help. We dispatched officers to walk our downtowns and hand out flyers in Spanish to educate populations on precautions to take. We conducted robocalls in Spanish and English to our school districts to provide information, and we graduated 2 recruit classes early and put them on foot patrols in our downtowns. And we had specially trained officers begin to vaccinate our community members. It was a struggle to find effective ways to communicate with the entire department. Initially, I would go out to each precinct at different tours and gather those on patrol and simply talk with them and let them know that we were working mightily to keep them and their families safe. This evolved into weekly emails and messages straight out to the patrol cars to present them with not just the numbers, but to let them know that we had their backs during this unprecedented time. The murder of George Floyd, more than 1,200 miles away in Minneapolis, reverberated immediately in Suffolk County as we gathered again to prepare for the most wide-ranging, significant civil unrest in the county's history. Between May 25th of 2020 and November 18th, there were protests in every state in the United States, involving more than 15 million people. Suffolk County alone had more than 300 protests during this time. It was difficult to convey what I saw in the faces of the officers, asked night after night to stand on the line and keep our communities safe. But because of their incredible resilience and professionalism, more than 300 protests resulted in no more than a handful of arrests and no significant property damage. The call for reform led to Governor Cuomo's June 2020 Executive Order 203, requiring that each police department develop a police reform plan. All of us in law enforcement work hard every day to partner and listen to our communities. And while that effort must continue, as I reflect back on the hard work we did to develop a significant and impactful reform plan, I was struck by the individuals inside the department who stepped up with transformative ideas, many of which served as the backbone of the pivotal plan. These thought leaders were critical to a successful plan, and one that has to be accepted and ultimately implemented by the rank and file. This made me realize it's important to cultivate, nurture, and seek out these thought leaders. In a changing environment, these are the people that will make a difference. You know who they are. They are always thinking of new, innovative ideas. Open your door and be accessible to these people. Make sure that they are comfortable approaching you informally to share some really, really great ideas. They offer their opinions for the right reasons. Throughout my 25 years in law enforcement, I have always strived to break down barriers and bring together the best people to solve problems. Through the persistent work of so many people in this room today and the men and women that we work with, we have seen progress on a host of issues that at one time seemed insurmountable. In the end, I believe that there is a reason and a purpose for the journey that we are on. Law enforcement is indeed a calling, and we play a vital role in times and in places that are not always of our own choosing. So for our leaders in this room, look for the potential in those around you to step forward. And for those who want to lead, I encourage you to raise your hand and be open to opportunities that you may never have thought of. So as we leave here today, in this most challenging of time for law enforcement, let's not forget who we are and why we do what we do. Let's not forget what we have accomplished and what we can continue to do when we work together. And let's not forget that although we need to reach out across to our communities, that we will always have each other's back. There is much more work to do. But we will always be successful as long as we stay focused on the job and adhere to the values that we all stand for. Let's renew our commitment to the idea that when we work together, nothing is impossible. I want to thank you and thank all the men and women who put their lives on the line every day to keep our community safe. God bless each of you, stay safe, and please take care of each other.
Thank you, Commissioner Hart. We now have time to take a few questions for Commissioner Hart. If you'd like to ask a question, feel free to come up to one of the microphones up front here, and you can ask her anything you like.
Almost anything.
In the meantime, I have a question for you, based on what you were saying. You know, a lot of people here are new leaders. They were recently promoted or recently in a new position, and sometimes going from working with your colleagues to being in charge of your colleagues can be difficult. How you went through a lot of changes like that through different careers and different organizations. How did you deal with that?
Sure. So, and that's a great question, and it's never easy, particularly to lead the people that you worked with prior. So, in my experience, I would move on and move to a different squad to lead new individuals, and I think that's really a good idea, if possible, to really kind of start fresh, because it's difficult to lead those that you worked with. But if you do, I'm sure that you have reached that position because you are well thought of and considered. So certainly continue to be fair and make sure that you are giving equal opportunities to everybody that you work with.
I wanted to know, how were you able to successfully cultivate a career in leadership while still being a mother and raising your children?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, and it is not easy. I think one of the challenges that we face having women in law enforcement, the number really hasn't changed. It's always been between 9 and 11% nationwide of women in entering law enforcement. And I think part of the problem is the optic of it. So we need to communicate that there are other opportunities. I think when people think about law enforcement, they think about the patrol car and the traditional hours. I think there are a number of opportunities in law enforcement, whether it's detective work or community service, a school resource officer, different avenues that they can take that lead to a little bit of flexibility in their work life. I will say that the FBI did give unpaid leave up to a year when you had a child. So I always joke my children had very dissimilar situations. For my first child, I was able to take almost a full year. I would always say that I'm hiding out from my supervisor, who would try to call me, and I was like, I'm not coming back yet. And then my son, I was right in the middle of a trial, so I came back within 6 weeks, so he kind of got the short end of the stick. But again, just trying to teach that kind of non-traditional piece of law enforcement that is available to women to really kind of encourage them to come on.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Following up on her question, recruitment is a big problem
Yeah.
now, especially with what happened last year. I know in the Suffolk County Sheriff's Office, we're going through a recruitment right now, different law enforcement agencies. What do you recommend to recruit not only just more officers, but a more diverse population of officers?
Yeah, and I see Deputy Commissioner Risco-Mention-Lewis is here. She did a great job in the Suffolk County Police Department. We came up to the point where we were offering the test, which is offered every 4 years. So we had about a year beforehand to do a really strong outreach event. And I think it's, again, making sure that people know those non-traditional roles, talking to people who have had family in the police department, and identifying those who maybe have not, and what brought them to the police department. Speaking to them and making sure that our advertising is reaching out to them, that all of our outreach is reaching out to them, that we're doing non-traditional outreach into our communities, that we're asking our community leaders to help us with the effort. I think all those things together gave us a really good platform for the most non-white individuals signing up for the police tests that we've had in our history.
Wow. We have some questions also that came from people who couldn't be here. I won't ask you all of these. There's a whole bunch of them here. But what this person asks, what is one of the most rewarding experiences of your career?
Oh, that's a good question. I think it's true for all of us. Whenever you can have a situation where you're able to bring some sort of closure to a victim's family, whatever the offense might have been. I worked some cold case homicides in my time, and I think some of the families had given up on any sort of closure. And to have that ability to bring somebody to justice for them is really, really very rewarding. I think it's probably the idea that sticks out for me probably the most in my career.
Yeah. So how do you get your team on board with an idea or a program they're hesitant to embrace? I know the police reform and reinvention, some of the ideas in there, maybe some of the rank and file were, not so happy about adopting, but that's the way it goes. So how do you get your team on board with some of those things?
Yeah, and I think that's really critical, is the implementation of the police reform plan. I think, for us, it was, as I mentioned, those kind of thought leaders that are inside the department, that have been there for decades and have some tremendous ideas to share, some tremendous solutions to challenges that have been persistent perhaps for a long time. They're very well-regarded people. I see some of them in the audience today. And those are the people that you really want to listen to and bring on board. And those are the ideas that you want to implement. Of course, we heard from our communities and we engaged, and there were some tremendous ideas that came from the outside. But internally, there's some great strategies. So for us, I was lucky to have those individuals. And then I really wanted to kind of push that out to our rank and file, that these are ideas that have come from within. And they probably are concerns that every level in our department has shared at some point or another, things that they really wanted to fix, but didn't have the opportunity. And here was really a very unique space where we could do that. So I think, again, identifying those thought leaders, encouraging them, making sure that they have the tools that they need to be part of the process, to have a voice at the table, and always be kind of accessible to them. And I always really wanted to do that in the police department. When I got to the commissioner's office, there was nobody there. There was nobody visiting. It was very quiet. And I said, where's everybody? And the idea was that nobody comes up to the commissioner's office. It's kind of like the principal's office. So I tried to change that. I tried to be more accessible and hear from people, because really, when you think about it, I was coming from the outside. I was coming from the FBI. I was able to draw on people who had decades of experience, and I think it's smart to do that, and I think it's smart to embrace that.
Coming from the FBI, did you feel was there a lot of pushback to you as being like a federal agent as opposed to on the county police level?
No, it's funny. So when I came over, I sat with Steve Davis, who was the communications person for the New York City Police Department. Sat with him when I was named, and I asked him what he thought my biggest challenge would be. Would it be that I was a female coming into a male culture? Would it be the FBI? And he said the only issue that you might have is the FBI piece, because they might see you as overseeing them rather than leading them. So that was always kind of something in my mind that I had. I never wanted to have that optic, that I was coming in to really impose some sort of oversight on them versus to lead them, which is a totally different perspective. So I think that really pushed me also to be out there and kind of engaging and trying to get people to know me and who I am.
So now you're on the university level.
Yes.
So you went from the federal level to the county level to the university level. Can you give us some of the differences or what you enjoy about each or where you're at now, what that's like?
Sure. So I will say the FBI, the pace was very, very different. So you had a case assigned to you, and you really had a couple of years to work it. So you went about your case, and you brought in who you wanted to. You traveled where you needed to, and obviously you had to show progress. But at the end of the day, they would take about 2 years, 3 years to work these pretty big cases. The police department, as you all know, is completely different. You are constantly reacting to emergencies that are in front of you, and you don't have the luxury of that kind of time. So that was a huge difference. The university piece is very different. Definitely gives me time to reflect on my time, both in the FBI and the police department. Again, it's nice to be around young people. The campuses are full, and everybody's back, and there's a lot of energy. On the university campus, I've had opportunities to lecture, which I love to do, and to speak to young people. And a lot of people are interested in this career. So, you talked a little bit about recruiting and the efforts that we're doing in that arena. Just trying to get the message out to people about, all the commitment that is out there with all the people that join law enforcement and what they do every day and how tremendous a profession and a calling it is. So to try to get that message out, I've been doing that at Hofstra.
And that's great because a lot of the young people right now on college campuses, you see stuff on TV that they're maybe anti-law enforcement or have very liberal feelings that sometimes go against some of what law enforcement needs to do. So you being former law enforcement is a nice influence there.
And I think, I think we've encountered that. It's certainly true on a university campus, but it's true in all of our communities. I think that once we sit down and get to know each other and talk to each other, I think that some of those preconceived notions start to melt away a little bit. And it's the same. It's the truth in university campuses. So there are a group of people who are not big fans of law enforcement. So I try to take the opportunity to sit with them and talk to them. And once we get to know each other, it really goes a long way.
So what's the next thing you're looking to achieve in your career? You've had this great career. You've gone from the FBI to the police, and now you're in the university. What's the next thing you want to achieve?
Yeah, so I have two teenagers who, one is a junior in college and one is a senior in high school. So I do want to spend the next few years trying to guide them and get them through college. Go Hofstra. So hopefully they choose wisely. But I think I'll spend time, getting them through and doing that. I'd like to lecture more. I'd like to become an adjunct on campus. And then I don't know what the next step is. We'll see. It's kind of what we talked about this morning in my remarks, is that you don't know where you're going to be, but it's probably where you need to be. And you may not have imagined it, but certainly be open to it.
You spoke about having mentors and looking for people that could guide you. Who was your greatest inspiration in your career?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, I'd probably say my dad. He was an NYPD sergeant, as I mentioned. And, I just saw his kind of camaraderie that he had with his colleagues. Growing up, my godfather was his partner. And the families were, inseparable. So that was just something I was really used to. I always appreciated, he worked probably in the most difficult time back then in the city, which was in the 70s and 60s. He came on in the 50s. And just to hear that he was always very kind of level-headed and not, not kind of the angry, typical personification that some people perceive some police officers to be. He was just a very easygoing guy. He did street crimes in Queens, and he worked in the Bowery, and then he retired out of 1PP. But to have him kind of as a guide, it was helpful.
That's great. What do you think is the number one skill that is the most important skill you should have to be an effective leader?
I would say the ability to listen, to really listen, to kind of shut off your talking points for a few minutes and just hear people and what they really have to say, because genuinely people have some strong feelings, and many times it's based on some interaction that they had that may have been negative. And for you to put yourself in their position, right? So to empathize and say, what if that was me? What if that had happened to me, or that had happened to my child? I probably would feel the same way. So to kind of, put aside what you think you should say, and then just really listen and then react to that person and empathize and really say, you know what, I hear what you're saying, and you're right, and I'm sorry.
And that's probably a great way to look for future leaders, is by listening to their ideas and suggestions, like you said earlier, right? Yeah,
to listen, and I find in law enforcement there's such a hesitancy to kind of step forward and raise their hand for leadership positions. It's a little bit different with the civil service tests and things that they can do that. But in the FBI, I mean, you're either an agent or you're a manager. There's no kind of in between. So, you know, I find that I believe, especially in the Bureau, people are very hesitant to kind of take that next step. They joined to be agents. They didn't join to be managers. And they joined for that kind of freedom. So it's hard to kind of push. But, and it was hard for me. I had no desire to be in management. I really didn't. And I can honestly say if I wasn't pushed, I would not have done it. There's no way. So I think that I was lucky to have those voices in my life. But I would say be open to that. You know, there are people out there who recognize things in all of you. I'm sure people, you know, asked you to come today for a reason. So be open to that.
I have a question for Commissioner Hart. I know in law enforcement, two big things are perception of the public and morale of your officers. And I know when you became commissioner, you came with the scandal of the arrest of Chief Burke. What were you able to do to overcome these two aspects, build back morale in the department and bring the trust back into the public over the perception of the Suffolk County PD?
Yeah, I mean, I was lucky because, as I said, the former commissioner had named some really, really impactful people as chiefs. So, so I walked into an atmosphere where there were great people at the top, and people respected them, and so that part of my job was easy. And then I just felt that I needed to work together with them, and always to get my message out to people that I was, you know, that I was open to listening to them, that I had their back, that we were in this together. And I always, you know, I always kind of close my remarks now by saying take care of each other, because it is such a difficult time in law enforcement, but also, you know, it means a lot of things, right? Take care of each other. It's not just, you know, let's protect each other at any cost. It's let's protect the job and what it means, and what good officers do every day to make sure that the reputation of the department is held at such high esteem. And if there are people that are not doing that, or not pulling their weight, or not acting in a way that's acceptable, then we also have a responsibility too to make sure that that's addressed. So that's kind of the message always out that I tried to do. And again, just calling on a lot of talented people around me, and making sure that, you know, together we were listening and we were out there.
All right, thank you.
How do you keep the rank and file that don't want to be motivated? How do you motivate them?
Or don't want to follow directions and go to the microphone. No, I'm only kidding. I'm only kidding.
About developing leaders, but how do we develop the people that don't want to be leaders? Because the majority of people that we do work with don't want to be leaders. They just want to blend into the background. How do we keep them involved and motivated, especially in corrections? It's difficult.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. I mean, the first thing of that is understanding that they may not want to move ahead, but they certainly have a responsibility for where they are. And it doesn't always require a civil service test. I mean, you can be the same rank and the same, whether it be you know, a sheriff for you or a police officer. Doesn't mean you have to step up to be a sergeant, but it's certainly there's an opportunity to make sure that you're mentoring people around you. And let's give them the tools to make sure that they're comfortable doing that. But we really rely on that, right? I mean, I think I always say sergeant in the police department is probably the most important position that there is, because they are the front line, and they can really save things from going sideways in a big way. But it's I think that the perception of a leader is not just, you know, checking the box to move up the ranks. It's who people perceive you to be. And I kind of gave the example of you know, coming onto scene. There are those people that, right, we know they're the rank of police officer, but when they get on scene, everybody knows that they know what to do, and that's the person that people are going to turn to. And it's going to be, you know, like I said, one person, maybe two, but then it's going to be, you know, get Joe down here. We need an answer. So we need to keep those people motivated. We need to let them know that they have an obligation too. They have an obligation to make sure that they're setting an example for the people that come on. And those are really the informal ways that I think are so impactful. You know, we talk about the requirement that people report misconduct up the chain, and certainly that's important. But I think that it's more effective if it's nipped in the bud, if it's their colleague and their coworker, their equal, that says, you know what, we don't do things that way here, and take them aside when they see something that they don't agree with. That's really strong stuff. And if we can teach officers that it's okay to do that, if we can teach them that they can do that not only on their rank, but on the ranks above, that's what we should be doing. And that's really what they call active bystandership in law enforcement. And it's a powerful, powerful program that Suffolk is bringing on board, and I've seen lectures about, and it's really, really impressive stuff. So, you know, again, it's those frontline officers that have a responsibility, and we need to make sure they know that.
Thank you, Tom. I didn't mean to blow you up. Actually, yeah, I know. Lieutenant Cotter was actually my field training officer when I was promoted to sergeant. And so as far as field training goes, what do you look for when you're looking for colleagues to train their peers? You know, because he did a great job training me as a sergeant. Well, I think you did. But what do you look for when you're looking, like, what should field training officers be when you're choosing them to create, you know, people who you want to be future leaders?
Right, and that's such a key piece, right? When these officers come out of the academy and they're out on field training, to have that one-on-one interaction with a very well-regarded officer in the department can make the world a difference. I think many of you will say you remember your field training officer and you remember, you know, certain things that they taught you. We had something similar in the Bureau where we had a training agent. So when you're on probation, you had a training agent. And it's a really key moment, that assignment. So we need to look for those people, and we have in Suffolk County, to vet and make sure that we're having the best people step up and be field training officers and lead by example and show what we're about and what's not acceptable. And those bad habits can start early. So we really need to make sure that we're on top of that. And having good, strong leaders in those roles.
Anyone coming up? How do you overcome the moments when you feel like you're not being a good leader? You know, like you were saying, fake it till you make it. Like, what do you do when those times where you feel like you're supposed to be in this leadership position, but you're not exactly sure if you're doing what you should be doing, or you don't know what to do? What do you do at those times?
Yeah, and you know, they come. If you're not having those moments, then you're not really asking yourself the right questions, because there are times when things get pretty tough, and you know, you're thinking, am I doing the right thing? Am I getting through to the officers? I mean, that was kind of always a big question for me. It's such a big department, and you're able to interact when you can and where you can, and do your best to do that. But is your message getting through? Are people listening? Are they following? Are they understanding the vision that you're laying out? And some days are tough, and there, you know, things happen that maybe it's not getting through to certain people, and you think, you know, what could I have done better? So for me, it's you know, calling on people that I respect, calling on colleagues that I used to work with or currently work with, to really, you know, just go over it, and you know, to have that kind of sounding board. It's important. It's important stuff. It's important to have colleagues on your level that you can talk to openly, because it's hard when you're the head of the organization. You can't really look down and kind of complain to your underlings. You have to kind of grin and bear it. I can tell you that I've had that relationship with the sheriff here in Suffolk, that we've gone out to commiserate over coffee, and really just what is going on, you know, whatever it might have been, some political piece or something in Newsday perhaps. That you just shake your head and you know, how do we get through this? So to have those kind of relationships, and I've had them with many people here in the room, and also that you'll hear from. Bill Bratton is very generous with his time. He's been a tremendous mentor. And, you know, again, to really have that ability to call somebody up of that stature and say, you know, what am I doing wrong? And have them say, you know what, you're not. You're doing a good job. It's just going to take some time. It's going to, you know, it's a huge vessel that you're trying to move, and it moves slowly. So I've been fortunate to be surrounded by people like that, and you're going to hear from them, and you'll see what I mean.
No questions. Speaking of Newsday, they were talking, you know, we're living in this world of the pandemic and vaccinations, and Newsday had a report that the number one thing that officers have line of duty death this past year was COVID, but not a lot of them are being vaccinated. Do you think that's the job of people in leadership in the department to push vaccination? Do you think that's, I mean, I'm kind of a hot button issue here.
Yeah, right. Well, I just remember, you know, when the vaccination came aboard, we couldn't wait to get out and get it, right? And I remember I was, you know, can I get it? I'm not sworn. The sworn should go first, and just kind of the attitude then was like, let's get it. Let's, especially the older officers, and you know, all the concern about bringing it home to your family and all the things that went around that, we couldn't wait to get it. So I think leading by example and showing that you know, it's the right thing to do. I don't think I would have predicted then that we were in a situation where there's hesitancy, but certainly, you know, understand it. We had it at Hofstra. We had to let go some officers who, there was a mandatory vaccination piece, and we had to let go officers and an assistant director. If anybody's interested, we have an opening. But I was shocked. I said, you know, this person had a child who was a junior in college getting free tuition, and they just wouldn't budge. And they left, they got fired. So it's a really, really emotional topic, but I think we lead by example is the bottom line.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought we had someone come up. And this is a question someone sent in. How can a leader fail? I mean, you wouldn't know anything about this, but I know that. But how can a leader, like what things do leaders do sometimes that cause them to fail?
I think they get wrapped up in their own ego. I think that they think it's about them. Somebody said recently, you know, it's not, you want to do commissioner. You don't want to just be the commissioner. So it's not the title. It's, you know, it's how can I make an impact? How can I help? But some people take it for the wrong reasons. And I'm not just talking about this spot. I'm talking about leadership roles in general. They take it, you know, to check a box or as a stepping stone or because their ego is big and they love to be called, you know, something. And I think that's a huge mistake. And I've seen it. And I've worked for people who had kind of the wrong intentions in that regard. And you can see it right away. I mean, in law enforcement especially, you're all trained investigators. You can see authenticity immediately. And I think you appreciate it. And they're going to make mistakes. I've made mistakes, certainly. But you know that it comes from a good place. And you know that, that this person, hopefully you saw that in me, was here for the right reasons. What do you hope your kid, you have two children, you said. I do.
What do you hope they see in you as a leader, as law enforcement, in all of what your career has gone along the way?
Yeah, so it's, you know, they probably saw me come home sometimes after a really difficult day, and just understood, you know, kind of the impact that that has on me and on every leader. When things go sideways, it's personal many times. I hope they took away just kind of that feeling of just kind of, I guess, equity, right? That you want to make sure that you're a fair person, that when you perhaps, you know, did something that wasn't exactly the way that you wanted it to go, that you want to fix it, that you'll make mistakes and that you should own them. That's one thing, you know, you cannot ignore, especially when the limelight is on you, that your mistakes are pretty much publicized, but as long as you own them and try to make it better, I hope that's a lesson that I taught them.
Good morning, Commissioner. So you spoke about field training officers before, and this is something that, you know, I've kind of been thinking about for a while. And you know, after a relatively long career in law enforcement, it's one of the things that I think overall, you know, maybe we could do a little better job of recruiting those individuals. And you know, thinking back to the George Floyd incident and recognizing that Derek Chauvin was actually a field training officer. And kind of understanding that I think at times some of those individuals aspire to maybe being more than a field training officer, but maybe weren't able to get to that level due to civil service promotion rules and tests, and maybe take that position for the wrong reason. You know, and after running 3 precincts in New York City, unfortunately, over the years, I think I've recognized a few people who were maybe in that role for the wrong reasons. What can we do in law enforcement to incentivize that role? Almost, you know, get county government, whoever it is, you know, federal government to understand that that's a role that, you know, again, maybe we need to incentivize so we don't get another George Floyd, you know, type of situation where, you know, some monster who maybe wants to lead for the wrong reasons is you know, committing some atrocity that's going to affect the entire world.
Yeah, no doubt. And you nailed it, you know, on the head when you talked about your role commanding different precincts and your ability to identify those officers in your precinct. So we rely so much on the inspectors to be of good judgment and to look across and down their chain of command to see, you know, do we have the right people in the right places? Certainly from my vantage point, that was really a question that I was always asking myself. But we rely so heavily on that, and to have good people there who can say, you know what, this guy's been a field maybe training officer for some time, but he's getting a little bit lazy, for lack of a better word, or sloppy. Maybe it's time to move on. We can certainly monetarily incentivize, and that does happen in many organizations, but I think there's more to it than that. I think people take a lot of pride in that role. So if we can, maybe make it a little more public that they're a field training officer, make it a little more publicized, and give them that training that they need to step out and really, say to their folks, this is the way it's done. Again, have the ability to look up in their chain of command and maybe question some things they're not being done properly. Those are all skills that are really difficult to institute in a paramilitaristic organization like the police department. But it's effective, and you can teach it, and you can train it. You can teach people to have those skills and speak up. And it's imperative, I think, now more than ever. As you mentioned, we saw it in Minneapolis firsthand, and it was devastating to an organization to have that. So if we can make sure that we're doing that with field training officers, the first line, then it's key.
Thank you.
On the flip side of that, there's a lot of new leaders here, and sometimes new leaders have trouble when they find they have someone working for them or in a role that they don't belong in. And how do they address that? How do they, that it's a kind of an uncomfortable situation to have to confront someone that's not going well. And if you're a new leader, maybe you don't have that experience of not firing someone, but giving them what the reality is. How do you go about that?
Yeah, and those are difficult conversations that you have to have. It is hard, but those are skills that we have to make sure that we're, incentivizing and instituting. It's in the police department. It's very difficult to speak up like that, especially as a new leader. You are expected to make your bones in that spot. You may not be thought of as somebody who, should be speaking in that way immediately, but make those people on the other end of it receptive to that. And if you know that leader is in that place for the right reason, that they want to make it a better department, it's not just about them, but it's about, let's make this a more productive place, and this person might not be pulling their weight, and they might not belong here. Again, having respected people as leaders will give them a better voice, and will give the people listening the ability to receive that information in a better way.
Well, I think we all respect you as a leader here, and we're really grateful for this Q&A and your speech today. We want to thank you for coming and speaking with us today.
Thank you, everybody. Enjoy the conference. Thank you.